The mercenary ship floated in the quiet of deep space, but inside the main hall, nothing felt quiet. The crew of the Black Rift Legion moved around with tight shoulders and tired eyes. They had been waiting all morning for details about a new mission. Most of them expected another routine escort job, maybe a cargo run or a patrol. But when their commander finally entered the hall with a tablet in one hand and a serious look on his face, the room fell silent in a strange way. Everyone could feel something unusual. He stood in front of the crew for a moment, as if choosing his words carefully, before saying that a wealthy diplomatic group needed protection through a conflict zone. The pay was much higher than they normally received for escort missions. That alone raised eyebrows. Extra pay always meant extra trouble, but it was the next sentence that made the room shift. The convoy they had to protect did not belong to some fragile trading race or a heavily armed military faction. It belonged to humans. For a second, there was silence. Then a loud laugh broke out from one of the younger fighters standing in the back. A few others joined in. Someone muttered that humans were just small, soft creatures with short lifespans and strange habits. Another commented that humans panicked easily, got emotional too fast, and were unpredictable in all the wrong ways. Someone else called them space toddlers. The room filled with casual jokes and light laughter, but not everyone was laughing. There were older mercenaries sitting near the edges of the hall, ones who had been in the Legion long enough to have seen real battles, real disasters, real close calls. They exchanged uneasy looks, not amused at all. One of them leaned back slowly, staring at the ceiling as if remembering something unpleasant. Another rubbed his hands together, quietly muttering under his breath. The young ones didn't notice, but the older ones knew better. People had stories about humans. The kind of stories you didn't hear on official channels. Stories whispered in spaceports, at broken tables inside dim taverns, near ships waiting for repairs. Stories about humans doing things no one else would dare to do. Stories about humans becoming calm when everyone else lost control. Stories about humans running toward danger when every other species ran away, but no one ever had proof. Just tailies. Just rumors. So the jokes continued. A technician laughed while polishing a piece of equipment, saying he didn't understand why everyone acted like humans were dangerous. A navigator joked that humans probably needed the escort because they would be scared of their own shadows. Another fighter wondered why a weak species needed to travel through a conflict zone in the first place. But the commander remained serious. He explained that the convoy was important. Very important. Not because humans had huge weapons or powerful ships, but because they were trying to broker peace between two large factions. If the convoy failed to pass through, a war might break out, one that could spread across several systems. Still, the crew didn't see why they had to worry. The pay was incredible. The job was simple. The enemy was predictable. And their clients? Just humans, a gunner repeated with a grin. But the commander didn't smile back. Instead, he added something that slowly wiped the smiles from several faces. He said the humans had specifically requested the Black Rift Legion, not because they were the strongest or the fastest or the biggest, but because humans liked the Legion's reputation for staying calm in impossible situations. The room grew quieter. Why would humans make a request like that? One of the older mercenaries leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and stared at the floor. He finally spoke just one sentence. If they asked for us, that means something bad is coming. Someone rolled their eyes, saying the older fighters always exaggerated. Another joked that humans probably just watched too many dramatic vids. But the older fighter didn't laugh. He just said softly, "You don't understand them." A newcomer asked what he meant by that, but the older fighter didn't answer. Not at first. He simply took a deep breath and looked around the hall at faces young and old, at people who had survived more battles than they wanted to remember. Then he said a sentence that instantly made the air feel heavier. Humans don't fear danger the way we do. That's what makes them dangerous. People stared at him as if waiting for more. Some wanted to argue. Others wanted to laugh it off. But the older fighter wasn't joking. His voice didn't shake, and his eyes didn't look away. He spoke like someone who had seen something real. He explained that years ago, during a mission on a frozen moon, he and a small team had been trapped inside a damaged bunker. Supplies were running low. The temperature kept dropping. Their communication systems were blocked by a storm. Everyone felt panic pressing against their minds. Their own instincts told them to surrender to fear, to accept defeat. But a human engineer smaller, thinner, and clearly suffering from the cold kept working nonstop, refusing to sit down or rest. When everyone else believed they were going to die, the humans stayed focused, cracking jokes to keep the others awake, making plans when everyone else had given up. And that human survived long enough to repair the system and get them rescued, the older fighter said quietly. Most species freeze when fear comes close. Humans melt it and shape it into something else. The hall was silent. Someone whispered that it was just one story. Another pointed out that humans still looked fragile. But no one spoke as loudly as before. The mood had shifted. Even the ones who laughed earlier now seemed unsure, as if questions were forming inside their minds. A pilot asked if humans were truly unpredictable. Another wondered if humans acted differently under pressure. Someone else asked why so many veterans looked nervous whenever humans were mentioned. None of them got a clear answer. Instead, the commander finally raised his voice again. He explained that the convoy needed to leave within 2 cycles. The Legion had to prepare. Repairs, supplies, weapon checks, route planning, everything had to be ready. He ordered the crew to focus, reminding them that jokes wouldn't keep anyone alive if danger showed up. One by one, the mercenaries left the hall, but the atmosphere was different now. The younger fighters walked out, still smiling, but their smiles were softer. The older ones moved with slower steps, lost in thought. A few stood near windows, staring at the stars with quiet concern. Down in the hangar, engineers began working on the ships, tightening bolts and running diagnostics. Some of them whispered among themselves about what humans might be like up close. In the armory, fighters polished their weapons while arguing softly about human behavior. In the navigation room, pilots studied the star maps carefully, wondering why a diplomatic trip needed such a high-level escort. And in the quietest corners of the ship, a few individuals thought about the stories they had heard, stories that never left their memories, stories about humans doing the impossible. As night cycle approached, the ship's lights dimmed. Crew members went to their bunks, though many struggled to sleep. Even those who usually slept deeply now lay awake, staring at the ceiling, imagining what the next few days would look like. They didn't know the humans yet. They didn't know their faces, their voices, or their behavior. They didn't know how they talked, how they reacted, how they handled pressure. But they were about to find out, and although most didn't want to admit it, not even to themselves, there was a small spark of curiosity inside them. A spark mixed with unease. A spark that made them wonder if the old stories were true. The Black Rift Legion had fought pirates, raiders, and enemy fleets. They had fought in storms, inside black holes, and on dying worlds. They had survived things that would break most groups. But this time, the question whispered through the ship in the quiet hours was different. They're just humans, right? So why were the veterans afraid? The Legion didn't know the answer yet, but soon they would. And their lives would never be the same after the mission began. The day the Black Rift Legion finally met the humans, the ship felt different. Not louder or busier, but strangely tense, as if everyone was waiting for something they couldn't explain. The crew had seen many species in their careers. Tall ones, small ones, ones with scales, ones with feathers, even ones that barely spoke. But humans were still a mystery to most of them, a rumor wrapped in jokes and old stories. And now those stories were walking toward them in real life. The meeting was scheduled in the docking bay. The entire area had been cleaned twice, lights polished, and equipment pushed aside to make room. Some of the younger mercenaries stood close together, whispering excitedly, ready to prove the older ones wrong. Some of the veterans stood quietly, arms crossed, eyes narrowed, as if preparing for something they couldn't predict. The commander waited near the center, hands behind his back, trying to look calm. But even he felt a tightness in his chest. No matter how experienced a leader was, meeting humans for the first time always came with a sense of the unknown at last. The doors opened with a soft metallic sound. The human team stepped inside. There were only 5 of them, 3 men and 2 women, though none carried weapons. Their clothes were simple, not fancy or intimidating. They looked like ordinary researchers or explorers. Their faces showed no fear, no stress. In fact, all 5 walked with a quiet confidence, almost relaxed, as if they had stepped into a neighbor's house rather than a mercenary ship. That alone made several mercenaries uncomfortable. One of the younger fighters whispered loudly, "They look too calm. Do they even know what kind of mission this is?" His friend elbowed him, trying not to laugh. The humans heard the whisper, but reacted with nothing more than faint smiles. The leader of the human group, a tall man with calm eyes, stepped forward and greeted the commander with a warm handshake. Most species didn't use handshakes. For many aliens, physical contact on a first meeting felt strange, maybe even unsafe. But humans never seemed to care about things like that. That commander hesitated for a second before returning the handshake. The man's grip was firm, but not aggressive. Some mercenaries watched closely, as if expecting the humans to make some bold or dramatic move. Instead, the humans simply introduced themselves politely, speaking in clear, easy tones. Their accents were different from anything the mercenaries were used to. But their voices were steady. Something about that steadiness bothered a few people. It didn't match the fragile, panicky image so many had in their heads. After introductions, the humans placed their belongings on a nearby bench. Most were small bags containing data devices, medkits, simple tools, and personal items. Nothing threatening, nothing heavy. A technician whispered to another, "They travel so light. They can't be serious." Another replied, "Maybe they don't know how dangerous this route is." The humans turned toward them with light smiles again, but said nothing. Their faces didn't show insult or irritation. They simply seemed amused, calm, almost understanding. That unsettled the mercenaries. Even more. As the commander gave the humans a tour of the ship, the crew watched with unusual attention. They wanted to see how humans acted, how they reacted, what they thought of everything around them. The first moment that surprised everyone happened near the navigation deck. A sudden tremor shook the ship. Only a small one, hardly anything to worry about. The younger mercenaries flinched. One of them swore under his breath. A few reached for the nearest support rail. And the humans? They didn't even blink. The tall human leader glanced calmly at the ceiling, listening to the faint echo. Then he asked, "Minor gravitational shift?" The navigator blinked in surprise. "Yes. How did you know that?" The human shrugged lightly. "We had ships back home that shook worse on landing." The mercenaries exchanged glances, a little embarrassed that they had reacted more strongly than their passengers. A second moment came soon after, when the ship's AI sent an alert about an unexpected movement in a nearby asteroid belt. It wasn't dangerous, but it required quick adjustments to avoid debris. The commander ordered a slight change in course. The mercenary pilot began tapping buttons quickly, trying to calculate the safest route. Some crew members grew nervous. A few whispered about the need to double-check everything. They had lost ships before to asteroid fragments. The humans didn't panic. Instead, one of them, the smallest woman in the group, stepped closer, gently asking if she could view the navigation screen. The pilot allowed it, expecting her to be confused, but she studied the data for only a few seconds before calmly suggesting a simpler route. The pilot frowned. That path requires faster thruster adjustments. It's risky. The woman nodded. Yes, but the asteroid rotation is slowing. The window will last at least 7 minutes. You'll save power and time. The pilot hesitated, ran the numbers again, and realized she was correct. He stared at her, then at the screen, then back at her. How did you see that so fast? She shrugged. Humans are taught pattern recognition early, and I like puzzles. The pilot didn't know how to respond. Around the ship, whispers began spreading. How does she stay so calm? Did you see how she handled the data? They act like they've been through worse. They don't panic. Why don't they panic? Soon the humans were shown the engineering bay. This time, one of the human men knelt down beside a large coolant line without being asked. He gently touched the surface, then nodded toward a small spot almost too tiny to see. You might want to check that seal. It's leaking micropressure. The engineering chief frowned, scanned the area, and froze. The human was right. The mercenaries couldn't hide their confusion anymore. These weren't the fragile, helpless creatures they had pictured. These weren't the nervous, emotional beings the stories had mocked. These humans were calm, focused, curious, and strangely good at noticing details. They didn't brag. They didn't show off. They didn't act superior. They simply adapted quickly and helped without hesitation. Later, when the humans were escorted to the dining hall, some mercenaries sat nearby pretending to eat while secretly watching them. One tried to test them. He asked loudly, "So, are humans really as emotional as everyone says? Do you cry when the engines get loud?" A few mercenaries snickered. The humans looked at each other, then one of them laughed softly, not offended, not angry, just amused. The tall leader replied, "We cry when we lose people we care about, not when engines rumble." His tone was soft, not defensive. The mercenary who had asked the question froze, feeling strangely embarrassed. He didn't expect such an honest and balanced answer. Someone else tested them next. "How do you handle fear?" Another mercenary asked, leaning forward as if expecting a strange explanation. One of the women answered gently, "Everyone feels fear. We just decide what to do with it." The mercenaries grew quiet. They didn't expect that either. Another human added, "Fear sharpens our senses. It doesn't control us." The older mercenaries exchanged glances, those words. They had heard them before, in old stories, in old reports, in whispered accounts from battles where humans refused to break dot by the time the meal ended. The mood on the ship had shifted again, but not the way it had earlier. This time, the silence wasn't filled with confusion or disbelief. It was filled with something new. Respect, cautious respect, but still respect. The commander escorted the humans to their assigned quarters, while the rest of the crew returned to their duties. But every conversation that followed had the same tone: thoughtful, uncertain, curious. I thought they'd be nervous. I thought they'd act scared. They don't even panic. They act like they've done this 100 times. Late in the night cycle, when most of the crew rested, a small group of mercenaries gathered near a window overlooking the stars. Someone asked if the older stories about humans were true. Someone else said maybe the rumors weren't exaggerated after all. Another whispered that maybe fear wasn't the right word. Maybe misunderstanding was. But one of the older, Mercenaries said something that made them all fall silent. You saw them today. They didn't freeze. They didn't shake. They didn't show pride or fear. They just stayed calm. He looked at the stars as if remembering something painful. That's why people fear humans. Not because they're loud or strong, but because danger doesn't break them. It wakes them up. No one argued after that. The humans slept quietly in their rooms, unaware of the conversations swirling around the ship, and the Black Rift Legion lay awake, wondering what kind of species stepped aboard their ship that day, and what they would be like when danger truly arrived. The next morning, the Black Rift Legion prepared to leave the safe zone. The ship hummed softly as engines warmed up, lights flickered to full brightness, and crew members moved through the halls with practiced steps. But even though everyone followed their routine, the air felt heavier than usual. The humans had made a stronger impression than anyone expected, and the crew kept glancing at them with a mix of curiosity and quiet respect. The humans stood near the main control area, strapped into their seats, calm as ever. They talked softly among themselves, almost like they were preparing for a long trip rather than entering one of the most dangerous regions of space. Some mercenaries watched them closely, trying to figure out what made them so steady. When the ship finally slid into the conflict zone, the view outside changed. The stars looked sharper, colder, as if the whole region held its breath. There were distant flashes from old battles, fragments of destroyed ships floating like silent warnings. Even the younger mercenaries stopped whispering. Everyone knew this place was unpredictable. Anyone could attack. Anything could go wrong. The humans still showed no sign of fear. As the ship moved deeper, a soft alarm echoed across the deck. Not an emergency alarm, but a cautionary one. The commander leaned forward, reading the data on the screen. Something was approaching fast. The mercenary pilot adjusted the ship, eyes narrowing. Could just be debris, someone said, or a scouting drone, another added. But the older mercenaries didn't relax. They knew that trouble in this region rarely came alone. The humans exchanged one brief look, not panic, not worry, just a silent understanding, as if they were preparing themselves mentally. The calmness on their faces made one of the younger mercenaries whisper, "Why aren't they scared? This place is known for ambushes." No one answered. A few moments later, the unknown object appeared on the screen. At first, it looked like a rock. Then it moved fast, too fast for debris. The pilot reacted immediately, swerving the ship to avoid it. The object shot past them, then looped around. "Not debris," the pilot muttered. "Someone's scanning us." The commander ordered shields up and sent a warning signal. But before the signal finished transmitting, 3 more shapes appeared on the radar. Then 5, then 9. A squadron. Some mercenaries swore quietly. Others tightened their grips on their weapons, even though they weren't firing yet. The hall filled with tension, thick enough to feel. The humans didn't move from their seats. They didn't gasp. They didn't speak. They simply studied the screen like students, analyzing a lesson. The commander opened a channel and demanded the approaching ships identify themselves. No answer. He tried again. Still nothing. The pilot muttered, "This is a setup. They're waiting for something." And that's exactly when the trap began. The first shot came out of nowhere, a loud burst against the shields that made the entire ship shake. Crew members grabbed the nearest rails to stay steady. Warning lights flashed red across the control deck. The attackers showed themselves now, drifting out from behind a shattered field of metal. They were pirates. Not random ones. This group was organized, well-armed, and confident enough to attack a fully equipped mercenary vessel. The commander immediately ordered defensive positions. The ship shifted into battle mode, lights turning dimmer, alarms becoming sharper. Fighters rushed to their posts. Engineers grabbed emergency tools. Medics, prepared for injuries, got through all of this. The humans remained strangely composed. One human leaned forward slightly, studying the attack pattern on the screen. Another asked a simple question: are they targeting engines or shields? The pilot blinked in surprise. Shields? Why? The human nodded thoughtfully, but said nothing. The next wave of shots came faster, harder, shaking the ship once more. The shields flickered. Mercenaries started shouting instructions to each other, while the commander barked orders to return fire. Still, the humans kept observing. Another loud hit rocked the ship, and the youngest mercenaries tensed up, fearing the shields might fail. But the smallest human simply adjusted her seatbelt and said quietly, "They're trying to disable movement first. They want to trap us." "How do you know?" a mercenary asked, breathing hard. She pointed at the pattern on the screen. "They're testing the shield strength, not aiming for the hull. They want the ship intact." The mercenary stared at her. She was right. The commander hesitated, unsure how she saw it so quickly. But before he could ask anything, a loud announcement echoed through the deck. Incoming ships on the right flank. The pirates had surrounded them. One of the mercenary gunners panicked slightly, shouting that they were being boxed in. Another yelled about needing backup. The crew rushed to adjust weapons. The ship tilted sharply as the pilot tried to maneuver through the tightening ring of enemy vessels. Still, the humans didn't panic. Instead, the tall human leaned toward the commander and spoke calmly. "They're trying to force you into a narrow corridor between those two asteroids." The commander blinked. "How do you know that?" The human pointed at the formation of enemy ships. "They're leaving a deliberate gap. That's where they'll trap you fully." The pilot checked the positioning, eyes widening. "He's right. They're hurting us." The commander ordered the pilot to break the formation. The ship turned sharply, engines roaring as they pushed away from the narrow gap the humans warned about. The pirates responded instantly, shooting aggressively, trying to stop the escape. But now the mercenaries knew the trick. Shots scattered across their shields, but the pilot managed to keep them out of the trap. The humans held onto their seats, calm even as sparks flew from the wall behind them. One of the humans spoke again. "They're coordinating from one ship. Look for the one that's not firing." The gunner searched quickly and found it slightly larger, staying steady at the back. That was the command ship, before the commander could even give orders. Another explosion rocked the ship, this time closer to the hull. The crew stumbled. A few shouted updates. The situation was getting worse, that the enemies tightened their circle. Their firing became more accurate, their attacks more aggressive. And yet, the humans stayed composed, studying the situation like a puzzle. Then something happened that changed the mood of the entire deck. Mercenary near the weapons console shouted in panic, "I can't get the main cannons aligned. They're jamming our targeting." The commander cursed under his breath. If they couldn't aim properly, they couldn't break the circle. A human stepped forward. "Disable your automatic lock. Switch to manual mode." The gunner scoffed. "Manual mode during a battle? That's insane." The human shook his head calmly. "Their jamming system is built for locking signals. Manual aim will cut through it." The commander hesitated. "Do it." The gunner switched to manual reluctantly, expecting it to fail, but the moment he aimed, the jamming effect vanished. "How did you know?" the gunner demanded breathlessly. The human simply said, "Because that's what I would do if I wanted to trap someone, but not destroy them." The pilot laughed nervously. "Humans think like pirates? Humans think like survivors." The tall human replied softly. Another shockwave hit the ship, and a fire broke out near the back panels. Engineers rushed to control it. Medics hurried to treat minor injuries. The situation kept intensifying, pulling the mercenaries deeper into chaos. But the humans didn't freeze, not even once. Instead, they started helping without being asked. One human pointed out a blind spot in the pirate formation. Another noticed a small weakness in one of the enemy's flank movements. Another suggested using a nearby asteroid's shadow to break the tracking system. None of their ideas were wild guesses. Every observation was sharp, fast, and strangely logical. They weren't soldiers. They weren't trained warriors. They weren't even armed, but under pressure, they became something else, focused, sharp, steady. While the mercenaries shouted, shook, and reacted, the humans analyzed, adapted, and guided. One of the older mercenaries whispered under his breath, "Now you see it? This is what everyone talks about." The younger fighters finally understood. The humans weren't calm because they were unaware. They were calm because danger activated something inside them, something steady, something determined, something almost frightening. The pirates unleashed a final massive wave of fire, and alarms blared across the ship. The shields dropped to half strength. Lights flickered. Panels sparked. But now the mercenaries weren't looking at the ship. They were looking at the humans. And for the first time, fear shifted. Not fear of the attackers, not fear of the quiet, steady creatures standing beside them, reading the chaos like a familiar story. The pirates thought they were trapping a weak species and an inexperienced escort group. But what they didn't know, what many in the galaxy still didn't understand, was that in moments like this, humans didn't fall apart. They woke up. The sun had already dipped behind the jagged cliffs when the human transport landed near the outpost. Dust rose in a slow cloud as the engines powered down. The mixed group of humans stepped out, some tired, some alert, some simply curious about what waited inside the alien base. None of them looked dangerous. They didn't carry any heavy weapons, only basic gear. But somehow, their presence made the mercenaries inside the outpost grow stiff and uneasy. Inside the main hall, the outpost guards watched them through the glass panels. The mercenaries didn't know how to feel. These were the same creatures they had mocked only days ago, small, soft, fragile-looking. Yet every story they'd heard in the last 12 hours had changed the way they saw them. A human captain who outran a shock trooper squad. A medic who survived a fall that should have crushed anyone else. A technician who fixed a reactor meltdown using nothing but a toolkit and sheer stubbornness. None of it sounded normal. And now more humans had arrived. The first to step forward was a calm-looking woman with tired eyes. But her posture was straight and confident. She carried a tablet in her hand and surveyed the outpost like someone checking a hotel room before settling in. Behind her walked a group of engineers, a few scouts, and one older man who kept stretching his back as if the gravity annoyed him. The alien commander, waiting near the entrance, tried to control his nerves. He had never been scared of any species before, not even the ones 3 times his size with teeth longer than fingers. But humans felt different. They didn't look threatening, and maybe that was the problem. The woman looked at him and gave a polite nod. "We heard you've been having trouble," she said simply. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried an odd weight, as if she was used to dangerous places and impossible tasks. The mercenaries watching from the corner exchanged glances. Nothing about her looked capable of fighting, yet nobody dared speak over her. The commander cleared his throat. "Yes, we encountered something outside the ridge. Something not native." The woman tapped her tablet. "We saw the footage. We'll take a look. Point us where." Her casual confidence made several mercenaries stiffen. Did she not realize what the creature was? It had torn through armored walls. It had moved faster than their sensors could track. And here she was speaking as if she were going to inspect a broken pipe. The mercenaries whispered among themselves, confusion mixing with unease. One of them finally muttered, "Why do they talk like that? They're so small." Another replied, "That's the problem. They don't even understand fear." They didn't know the humans could hear every word. The older man cracked his neck loudly. "All right," he sighed. "Show us the damage. I want to finish this before it gets colder." The commander blinked. The temperature outside was far below freezing at night. The mercenaries wore insulated armor for a reason, but humans, they acted like it was just another chilly evening walk. The entire group moved toward the outer gate. Along the corridor, the atmosphere felt strange, almost stretched. The humans walked casually, chatting among themselves about simple things: food, sleep, equipment. The mercenaries followed several steps behind, whispering. Some tried to hide their fear. Others didn't bother hiding it at all. The outpost walls hummed with the low hum of machinery and flickering lights. Dust from the earlier attack still coated the floors. Panels hung loosely in some places. And near the exit, scorch marks lined the ceiling, evidence of the creature's power. A young mercenary rushed to open the main gate manually, but the moment he tried, the metal jammed. He struggled, pushing with all his strength, until his arms shook. The gate didn't move an inch. The older human man watched him, then sighed again. "Step aside," he said in a friendly tone. The mercenary hesitated, unsure if the man was joking. The man placed both hands on the metal frame, tightened his grip, and pushed. The mercenaries leaned forward in disbelief as the huge door screeched and slid open slowly. With effort, but still moving, the young mercenary stared. That door required mechanical assistance to move. It weighed more than a ground vehicle. Yet this human, who didn't even look muscular, had managed to budge it. How? The woman gave no reaction. "Good, let's move." They stepped outside, and the icy air hit them instantly. The wind carried the scent of minerals and the faint echo of distant growls. The sky was dim and heavy, casting long shadows over the rocky ground. The humans didn't seem bothered by the cold. They walked as if taking a normal evening stroll, observing the rocks, the tracks, the broken equipment from the earlier attack. The mercenaries, who usually felt confident hunting anything on this planet, now stayed much closer to the humans than they intended. The strange silence lasted until one human crouched near a set of deep claw marks etched into the dirt. "These are fresh," he said softly. "It's still around." A few mercenaries froze. The woman looked around calmly. "Good. That means we can find it before it attacks again." One mercenary whispered shakily, "Find it? They're going to go after it?" Another replied, voice trembling, "Who are these people?" The humans divided into pairs and spread out, scanning the area. Their movements were precise, as if they'd done this many times. But their expressions remained relaxed, almost casual, as if danger was just another routine. After a few minutes, one of the scouts pointed toward a gap between two large boulders. "Tracks lead there," he said. The woman nodded and signaled everyone to follow. The mercenaries hesitated. That gap led into a narrow ravine. Dark, dangerous. A place where things could hide easily. Normally, they never went inside unless fully armed. But the humans walked straight in without slowing down. The mercenaries exchanged looks. "Are we going with them?" "No idea." "If we don't, they'll think we're cowards." "But what if something jumps at us? Then hope the humans save us?" They entered the ravine. The walls rose high above them, jagged and sharp, casting long shadows. Small particles drifted from the cliffs with every gust of wind. The air grew colder. The deeper they went, the more the silence pressed on their ears. The woman suddenly raised her hand, signaling everyone to stop. No one argued. There, on the ground, lay broken pieces of a mercenary's armor pieces from the earlier encounter. The claw marks on them were deep. Too deep. One look was enough. to know the creature wasn't just strong, it was unnaturally strong. The humans inspected the pieces quietly. No panic, no fear. One even hummed under his breath while analyzing the metal fractures. Then something shifted. A faint scraping sound echoed from up above. The mercenaries jerked their weapons toward the cliffs. The humans looked up calmly. The wind blew dust down into the ravine, and for a moment everything was still. Then the scraping sound came. Again, closer. The woman didn't step back. She didn't shout. She simply raised her tablet and began recording. A shadow moved along the rocks. The mercenaries tensed. One whispered, "It's here." Something large slid into view, half hidden behind the cliff. A long arm, a glint of sharp claws, a quiet, guttural growl. And then it happened. The humans stepped forward. Not backward, not to hide, not to crouch. Forward. The mercenaries stared, mouths open. The woman spoke calmly, as if addressing a wild animal she'd seen 100 times. "Stay still. Don't provoke it." Her voice was steady, but her stance showed she was ready to move in an instant if needed. The creature climbed lower, its glowing eyes fixed on them. Its breath came out in heavy bursts, shaking the dust beneath it. Its size dwarfed them, towering like a living mountain of muscle and bone. The mercenaries' hands shook on their weapons. But the humans didn't flinch. One of them even whispered, "It's not as big as the ones back home." The mercenaries' minds shattered a little at that sentence. Back home? What creatures were bigger than this? The creature growled again. The woman exhaled slowly. "On my signal." The mercenaries didn't know what the signal was. They didn't know if she planned to attack, defend, or distract. But they understood one thing very clearly. They were standing beside something more dangerous than the creature itself. They were standing beside humans. And for the first time, the mercenaries realized why everyone else in the galaxy whispered the same question. Why are mercenaries terrified of humans? The creature's growl echoed through the ravine, bouncing between the rough stone walls until it felt like the sound came from all directions at once. Dust fell in soft streams from the cliffs above. The mercenaries tried to stay still, though their legs trembled slightly. They had never seen anything like this up close and alive. The earlier attack had happened so fast that most of them only saw a blur and the aftermath. Now the creature hovered over them, breathing heavily, its huge chest rising and falling like a slow-moving engine. The humans stood in front of everyone, forming a small protective line without even discussing it. It happened naturally, like they had done this countless times. The woman with the tablet kept her eyes on the large shadow above them. She didn't blink much. Her breathing remained steady and her posture firm. It was surprising how someone so calm could face something so dangerous. One human whispered, quietly to another, "It's watching our movements more than our voices." The other nodded, "It's testing us." The mercenaries heard every word, and their fear grew. The humans weren't just brave. They understood this kind of creature, or at least creatures like it. That meant either they had handled similar beasts before, or they simply adapted to danger quicker than most species. The creature shifted its weight, causing a rock to fall from the cliff. It hit the ground with a crack. Several mercenaries flinched, ready to run back toward the outpost. But none of the humans moved. The woman lowered her tablet slowly. "It's going to drop down," she said quietly. One of the mercenaries whispered in panic, "How do you know?" She didn't seem bothered by the question. Its shoulders tensed. "It's preparing to leap." Even as she said it, the creature crouched lower, its massive limbs stretching across the rocky ledges. Then it jumped. The mercenaries shouted and stumbled back, weapons raised, but the humans reacted with surprising speed. They didn't try to catch it or fight it. They simply moved in a way that suggested they knew exactly how the creature would land. The ground shook when it hit. Dust exploded upward. making it difficult to see for a moment. When the haze cleared, the creature stood only a few steps away. Its size was even more intimidating on level ground. The thick muscles along its body flexed with every breath. It tilted its head slightly, as if trying to understand why the humans weren't running. The woman took one careful step forward, palms open to show she wasn't holding any weapon. The creature's eyes followed her hands, then her face. It made a low rumbling noise, almost like a warning mixed with curiosity. The older human man glanced at the mercenaries. "Nobody shoot," he said calmly. "It's not fully aggressive yet." "Not fully?" One mercenary muttered, shocked. The man shrugged lightly, as if this situation wasn't the worst thing he'd faced. "If it were, we wouldn't be standing here." The creature stomped once, making a cracking sound beneath its sharp claws. Its tail swung slowly from side to side, scraping against the stone. Every movement seemed powerful enough to break bones. The woman studied the creature's face. "It's injured," she said softly. The others leaned closer, squinting through the dim light. The creature did look uneven on one side, as if something had struck its leg or shoulder earlier. The fur? Around that area was matted and slightly darker, hinting at a wound. One human crouched carefully. "That explains why it attacked the outpost. It's in pain and confused." A mercenary stepped forward a little too fast. "You're not thinking of helping it, are you?" The woman didn't turn but answered, "If possible." The mercenaries stared in disbelief. No one helped a wild creature like this. Not one known for tearing through metal and chasing down armed troopers. Yet the humans seemed ready to approach it, maybe even treat its injury. The creature snarled suddenly, a sound sharp enough to make everyone freeze. The humans paused, but didn't retreat. The creature took one slow step toward the woman, lowering its head. Its breath came out in warm bursts over the cold air. The woman held her ground. Slowly, she lifted one hand, not to touch, but to show she meant no harm. She whispered, "Easy, easy." The creature's growling softened, though tension still rippled through its huge frame. One mercenary whispered, "Is she too brave, or something else?" Another replied quietly, "This is why mercenaries fear humans. They don't break." The older human man moved beside the woman. "It's reading our intentions," he murmured. "Animals like this can sense fear." The woman inhaled deeply and said, "Good thing we're not afraid." She didn't say it loudly or proudly, just honestly. And somehow it felt true. The creature blinked slowly, tilting its head. Then it lowered its body slightly, almost as if acknowledging her presence. The woman nodded to the medic among the humans. "See if you can confirm the injury from here." The medic stepped forward carefully. He crouched and studied the creature's leg. Yes, deep scrape. Something metallic. Maybe shrapnel. The creature growled again, but not as loudly as before. The humans moved slowly, never making sudden gestures. Their calm behavior began to affect even the mercenaries. Some of them breathed a little steadier, watching the scene unfold with wide eyes. The medic reached for a scanner device. The creature's ears twitched at the soft beep, but it didn't react violently. The humans looked at the display dot. The medic nodded. "We can remove it." Several mercenaries gasped at once. "Remove it? Are you serious?" The older man turned toward them. "If we don't, it will stay aggressive and might attack the outpost again. But how will you get close enough?" A mercenary asked. The woman answered simply, "By asking." She stepped closer to the creature, her palm raised again. She spoke slowly, her voice soft in the cold air. "We're going to help you. Stay still, no harm. Understand?" The creature stared at her for a long moment, its chest rising and falling heavily. Then it did something no one expected. It lowered itself even more, placing its injured leg slightly forward as if offering it. The mercenaries nearly stumbled backward in shock. It understands her. The medic moved quickly, but gently. He used a small tool to remove a piece of metal lodged between the creature's scales. The creature winced, but it didn't react violently. The humans kept murmuring calm words, guiding its attention away from the pain dot. After a few moments, the medic said, "Done." The creature lifted its legs slowly, testing the movement. Then it let out a deep, echoing sound, neither a growl nor a roar, more like a release of tension. It took a step back, watching the humans with surprising clarity. The humans also stepped back to give it space. The creature looked at the mercenaries next. They stiffened immediately, unsure if they were now in danger. But the creature only snorted softly, as if acknowledging their presence, before turning toward the cliff walls. With a powerful leap, it climbed back up the rocks. Dust fell around its path, and within seconds, it disappeared into the shadows above. Its heavy steps echoed for a few seconds. Before fading out completely, silence filled the ravine dot, and one mercenary finally whispered, "What? What just happened?" Another shook his head slowly. They approached a monster, healed it, and it left them alone. A third mercenary swallowed hard. "I'm starting to think humans are scarier than the creature." The humans didn't appear proud or heroic. They simply brushed dust off themselves and prepared to walk back. The woman tapped her tablet. One less threat to the outpost. The older man stretched his back again. "Good. Now maybe we can eat something warm." The mercenaries stared at them, as if they were seeing a new species for the first time. One mercenary finally found the courage to speak. "Are all humans like this?" The woman looked at him, then smiled a little. "Not all, but most of us learn to adapt. We come from a difficult world." The mercenaries exchanged a long look. If this was what humans considered normal, then no wonder mercenaries whispered stories about them. As the group walked back toward the outpost, the sky grew darker, and small lights flickered across the cliffs. The cold breeze picked up again, but this time the mercenaries didn't mind walking behind the humans. It felt oddly safe. They reached the entrance of the outpost, and the crew waiting inside began asking questions at once. But before anyone could explain what happened, one mercenary simply said, "You won't believe it unless you see it." The humans stepped inside calmly, as if they had spent the evening doing something simple like checking equipment or fixing a machine. But the mercenaries knew better. They had witnessed something they would never forget. And tomorrow, when the galaxy's mercenary networks whispered their stories, this outpost would be added to the list of places where humans proved once again why nobody wanted to fight them. Because humans didn't run from danger, they approached it, helped it, and walked away unharmed. And that was far scarier than any monster. The outpost felt strangely peaceful after the humans returned. The lights flickered softly along the hallways, and the cold night wind brushed against the outer walls, humming like a quiet song. Inside, however, the mercenaries still hadn't settled. They gathered in small groups, whispering to each other, replaying every moment of what they had witnessed in the ravine. Every detail felt unbelievable to them. The calm way the humans had approached the creature, the strange understanding between the woman and the beast, the treatment of the wound, and the way the creature had left without attacking again. It all seemed impossible, yet it happened right in front of their eyes. The humans didn't seem affected at all. They walked through the outpost like people returning from a regular inspection. Some cleaned their tools, others checked their gear, and a couple of them sat down near a heater, warming their hands as if nothing out of the ordinary had occurred. One mercenary stared at them for a long moment before whispering, "How do they act so normal?" Another replied, "Maybe. This is normal for them." Even saying that felt strange. In the central area, the woman with the tablet was discussing reports with the outpost commander. She spoke calmly, explaining that the creature likely acted out of pain rather than aggression. She described its movements, behaviors, and what they had done to help it. The commander, who usually had full control of his emotions, looked overwhelmed. Finally, he asked her quietly, "Are all humans trained for situations like this?" She considered the question, then gave a small shrug. "Not trained, just used to difficulty. Humans grow up in unpredictable environments. We learn to adapt early." The commander nodded slowly, though it didn't seem to make him feel any less astonished. Nearby, the older human man stretched again, rubbing his lower back. "Gravity here is too stiff," he complained casually to another human. One mercenary overheard him and nearly choked. The gravity on this planet was 30% stronger than the standard most species used. Mercenaries trained for months to operate at this level without fatigue. Yet the human complained like it was merely an uncomfortable mattress. Slowly, the outpost returned to routine. Mess hall lights glowed warmer, and the smell of food drifted through the vents. Some mercenaries began to relax, though they glanced at the humans every few seconds. The humans sat together, eating quietly, sharing stories about past missions, some funny, some ordinary. They laughed softly, talked about home, and discussed ways to improve equipment. Nothing about them suggested they had faced a dangerous creature only an hour ago. One young mercenary hesitated near their table, unsure whether to approach or walk away. The woman noticed him and nodded gently, indicating he could speak. He swallowed, trying to gather his courage. "Can I ask something?" "Of course," she said, setting her tablet aside. The mercenary sat down slowly, looking nervous. "Back there in the ravine. Weren't you scared? Even a little?" The humans exchanged small smiles. The older man answered first. "Fear is normal, but we don't let it control us." Another human added, "When you grow up in tough environments, you learn that fear doesn't make things safer. Actions do." The young mercenary looked down at the table, thinking, "But that creature was huge." "I've never seen anything like it," the woman nodded. "We have seen things like it. Not exactly the same, but similar enough." The mercenary blinked. "On your planet?" "Yes," she replied quietly. "Our world is full of challenges, dangerous wildlife, harsh climates, unpredictable weather. Our ancestors faced these things daily. Those instincts stayed with us." The mercenary leaned back, processing her words. Slowly, pieces started fitting together in his mind. Humans weren't fearless because they were stronger. They were fearless because they were used to surviving difficult situations. Another mercenary joined the table hesitantly. "Is that why? Mercenaries are afraid of you?" The woman paused for a moment, then said, "Some are afraid because they misunderstand us. Others respect us because they've seen what humans can do when necessary." The older man chuckled. "And some don't want to work with us because they think we're too stubborn." One of the scouts laughed softly. "That part is true." The mercenaries began to relax a little. The more they listened, the more the humans seemed less like mysterious figures, and more like people who had simply learned to handle danger differently. Later that night, the outpost alarms remained silent. No creatures approached. No unexpected threats appeared. The valley outside lay still under the faint light of distant stars. Yet the feeling inside the outpost had changed permanently. Near midnight, the mercenary commander gathered his team for a short meeting. His voice was steady, but the look in his eyes showed that he, too, struggled to fully understand everything that happened. "You've all seen what humans are capable of," he said. "Not just in combat, but in their behavior, their calm, their adaptability." No one disagreed. They did not attack the creature. They approached it. They helped it. They were not reckless. They were not arrogant. They were simply confident. Several mercenaries nodded slowly. "And I want all of you to remember," the commander continued, that fear does not come from size or strength alone. Fear comes from unpredictability, from resilience, from the sense that no matter what happens, the other side won't break. His voice lowered slightly, almost thoughtful. Humans do not break easily. The mercenaries didn't need an explanation. They had seen it with their own eyes. Meanwhile, in the human section of the outpost, the team was settling in for rest. Some checked equipment one last time. Others wrote notes in small digital logs. A few simply lay down, exhausted from the long day. The woman walked to one of the large windows overlooking the valley. Cold blue light reflected off the rocks and metal. She watched the shadows for a while, as if making sure the creature wouldn't return in pain. The older man approached her quietly. "You look thoughtful." She smiled a little. "Just wondering if the creature will be all right." "It will," he replied confidently. "It was strong enough to move even with shrapnel stuck in it. Now that it's free, it'll heal faster." She nodded. "I hope so." He glanced toward the mercenaries talking nearby. "They'll think about this for a long time." She gave a small nod. "I know. They didn't expect humans to be like this." "That's normal," she said. "Most species don't." For a few seconds, they watched the window in silence. The valley remained calm. No movement, no danger. Just the quiet night. The woman finally turned away from the window. "Tomorrow, we'll help them repair the outer defense wall. After that, we move on." The older man smiled. "Another day, another surprise for someone." She gave a light laugh. "Probably." The next morning came slowly, with pale sunlight stretching across the cliffs and the outpost. The humans began their tasks early, fixing damaged equipment and reinforcing defenses. The mercenaries watched them work, still amazed at how they handled heavy tools and difficult tasks with such ease. By midday, everyone gathered near the gate as the humans prepared to leave. The outpost commander stepped forward, offering a respectful bow. "We appreciate everything you've done," he said sincerely. "Our survival today, it was because of you." The woman shook her head. "We just helped where we could." "No," the commander said firmly. "You did more than help. You taught us something." The humans raised curious eyebrows. "You taught us that strength isn't always about weapons or armor," the commander said. "Sometimes it's calm under pressure. Sometimes it's understanding. Sometimes it's refusing to be afraid." The humans exchanged quiet looks. The older man smiled. "We're glad to help." The gate opened slowly. The transport ship hummed to life, preparing for takeoff. Before boarding, the woman looked back at the mercenaries. "Stay alert. And remember, most dangers aren't as scary when you face them together." The mercenaries nodded deeply, taking her words to heart. The humans boarded the ship. The engines flared, and the craft lifted off. Dust swirled below as it soared upward, then disappeared into the bright sky. Silence settled for a few moments after the ship vanished. Then the young mercenary from earlier whispered, "They're just humans, right? Then why are we still shaking?" Another mercenary answered softly, "Because humans aren't just strong. There's something else, something we don't fully understand." The commander placed a hand on the young mercenary's shoulder. "That," he said quietly, "is why mercenaries across the galaxy fear them." And the outpost would remember this truth for years to come.